Oh. Hello and welcome to today's session. Now I'm just going to take a moment, maybe a minute or so, to wait for people to join, but we'll get started in a second. Yeah, I can see people are already beginning to trickle in and probably finishing off their last meetings for the day before we embark on this webinar. So we're going to take it easy and not rush anybody. We have a bit of time to settle down. All right, 2 minutes past the hour. Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy that you've joined us today for this session titled Go Green, Go Sustainable with Transport Collaboration. It's really heartwarming to see so many people registering for this session because it's one that's quite close to my heart. We'll get to that in a second. But before we dig into the topic and myself and our guest speaker today, a couple of formalities. This will also give some people a moment to settle down, grab a coffee, because I think most of you know the rules. But anyway, let's just go through it once. You, the audience, are muted during the session, so we cannot hear you. But you can type your questions into the little chat box at the bottom anytime during the session. We'll have time at the end to go through your questions. And we will also be launching a couple of surveys during the webinar. So those will pop up on your screen and you'll be able to give your input on the questions that we're going to cover. So this is a bit of an interactive session. The whole session is going to be recorded and you will be receiving the recording after the event in any case. So formalities aside, I'd like to give you a little bit of context about why we as Alpega are holding this webinar today. We develop transport management solutions, and it's actually right there in our DNA. Our company slogan is driving smarter logistics for a greener tomorrow. So naturally, that throws up some questions. How can we, as a logistics software solution provider, actually make a difference? And that is something that I've been trying to dig into quite a bit. I am the director of ESG here at Alpega Group, and we've been looking both at what our solutions do in terms of environmental impact and also what we as a company do. And I would like to welcome Professor Andrej Podlesek today as our guest speaker. He is a professor for sustainability and quality in industry, and he's also a partner at the Institute of Engineering, Product Industrial Engineering, and Product Lifecycle Management at OST. That's the Eastern Switzerland University of Applied Sciences. His research focuses on implementing sustainable manufacturing processes and product designs in industrial companies. So you can already see there's a bit of a crossroads here. And I'm very, very curious to learn more myself. Just before I hand over to him, I mentioned that we provide solutions. So one of my tasks has been looking at the many different ways across the transportation process that my customers can actually measure or make an impact on different aspects of ESG, but primarily sustainability in our case. And we've actually been discovering that there's an enormous amount, a spectrum of actions you can take, all across the tendering process, over into network optimization, into multimodal transport. Like there's many different levers you can pull to make a difference in your overall emissions, but all of them kind of come down to one common denominator, and that is that it's not possible without collaboration. It really requires everyone to be pulling in the same direction, to have some common goals between carriers and shippers. And it's this collaboration aspect which is also going to be quite fundamental to what Andre will be telling you about today. Sustainable and social challenges are not something that any given one organization or individual can solve. So Andre is here today to tell us about what such a collaboration can do, and what the different aspects are that can turn into a win-win for you. That sustainability and social challenges are not just a struggle or a fight, but they can actually lead to some very positive outcomes for you. So at this point, I will hand over to Andre. Take it away. I'm really curious to hear what you have to tell us.
Thanks a lot, Elena. I'm very happy to be here today and to share with you my thoughts about the impact of sustainability on transportation and the ESG expectations, and especially about collaboration as a win-win situation. So let's have a look at first poll that we like to make. So maybe Elena can take it from there, and then we jump into my topic, because I want first to know what you are doing here, why you are here, and what your interest is, why you're joining this webinar. So you see, I think, you see the 6 options now. Please press the buttons, and I will wait a little bit for the results to come in. I see the bars are switching from one side to the other as more people vote. Very interesting results coming in. So Elena, let me know when you think that we have an about complete picture.
Yeah, we still have a couple of votes trickling in, so you can still be heard if you want to click that button. But I think most people have cast their vote now. And the results are actually really, really heartwarming.
Wonderful. Good. Can you put the results on the screen, or should I just explain?
Katrin, can we actually display that? But the winning vote is that you personally want to improve sustainability. That actually got a very nice set of results. Now, if you click on the polls tab, you should be able to see the results as well. But yeah, the vast majority, this is a personal topic for people. I think that we probably all do feel that we would like to be able to make a difference in our area of influence. Followed by customers asking for sustainability targets and action. That's companies being held accountable by their customers. And of course, there is increasing regulatory pressure. We're seeing the new European reporting sustainability standards coming up, for example. There is definitely more regulatory pressure there. And in some cases, it's also investors and customers. So far, nobody's feeling pushed back by the suppliers, though.
Yeah, this is very, very interesting result, because of course I'm very happy to see that people personally want to improve sustainability, and I'm also kind of happy to see that customers are asking for that, and you are now here to learn more about what you could do about it. And yes, luckily or sadly, whatever side you're on, there's increasing regular pressure, which on the one side might help on the equal level playing field, but on the other side, of course, adds extra burden to the companies. So With that picture in mind, I will jump into the transport sector and let's have a look at the impact. Why is it even important that we think about our impact and especially our impact on climate change, but also others? I will get to that later. So you can see here that if you just look at CO2 emissions, not at energy input, at CO2 emissions, the output, the transport sector is about 1/4. And inside the transport sector, there's, of course, a little distribution between the different modes. But let's say road transport plays the major role here. But then shipping via sea or a plane is still important. And a smaller role is the railway cargo. So with that in mind, let's think about what this means. What is the challenge here? And one important thing I want to outline is we're often talking about climate change, the key issue in looking at the impact it has on us. So that is what I'm showing here as a business as usual scenario, where we think about what is it causing on us if emissions continue to rise at the current rates, and we might come to a 4-degree warming by 2100, far, far away. But that, of course, means that there will be warming and more impact even before. So typically the business impacted from these physical risks are the temperature change itself, rainfall patterns changing, but also sea level rise. That is very often in the discussion. But then you come to the extreme weather events, and that might cause increased maintenance and operational costs, or it might change the way you need to do your business in terms of increased need to upgrade your assets, your buildings, your factories, your warehouses to be proof against these or to be safe against these increasing weather events. And there's also health and well-being impacts, maybe on your employees, also on the customers' employees, depending on where you are in the regions of the world. That is one very important side of the story, but there's also another side to the story, which means what happens if regulators are leading aggressive mitigation measures against climate warming, and they might therefore be able to help us in limiting the climate warming to 2 degrees. That will have an impact on how we can do business. That's the transition risks I'm mentioning here. So it might actually change the markets quite significantly. There's surely a reputational issue there because we will have more companies asking for other companies to act, but also for the public to look at companies, what they are doing. So the expectations on corporates might increase a lot to be low carbon, but also there's then a change in the consumer and investor preferences. So companies that are on that side and acting might have much better business opportunities compared to those that are not. And we are expecting technology shifts. There will be new technology available or existing technology changing in their price. Of course, obvious one is how will the oil price change, but also how will availability of alternative technologies like hydrogen change and be made more attractive. So from my perspective, we need to combine these two perspectives and have a look at that together. I'm trying to give you a little bit of an outline what this means concretely for us. So first of all, looking at these physical risks, they most of the time have an impact on our assets and some other ways. And I always see two sides of the story of the coin. There's chances and there's risks. Now let's look at the positive side, the chances. So if you are the one who has offerings on the market that are in line with the changing needs or the changing situation, for example, you are the one that has actually temperature controlled transports, and because of temperature rise, this becomes more important. You might then be able to secure a larger share of the business compared to competition. Or you are the one who is already employing or using alternative technologies. Here you see the image of a drone, how viable that is, but just as an analogy, that allows you to work in areas where others can't. So then, of course, this is a big chance for you to secure more of the business. Of course, on the other side, there's also risks. It might become too hot to work in certain areas. There might be problems at loading docks or at the transport itself because of high temperatures, because of too much sun impacting the operations there. And of course, talking about extreme weather events, hurricanes or flooding, extreme rainfalls, they might make the work of carriers or shippers using carriers more difficult or even impossible at certain times. That being said, let's look at the other side, the transition risks. So if regulators are really impacting us more than before and set a lot of reduction requirements, there's again two sides, there's chances. If you are the one who already has, similar to the above example, technology in use that is in line with these new requirements, for example, low carbon transports, vehicles that are considered green vehicles, that are considered low emission vehicles, you have, of course, then chances that this will have a positive impact on your business because you are already having these in place. You are not, let's say, forced to invest heavily in a short time frame to keep up with the regulations. Of course, there's also risks. The worst of all for some of us might be if you have to do additional reporting, if you have to create new numbers, if you have to create new information that wasn't there before. This is very often something that doesn't happen overnight. So it's a lot of internal work to be done. And depending on where you are there's chances or risks in the upcoming carbon tax discussion might positively or negatively affect you compared to competition. But also the EU taxonomy, where you might either be in line or it's called aligned with the taxonomy regulation, then you have better access to funds, better access to investments and green bonds, or you're not, then of course it's a risk because you might be cut off from certain money streams that you otherwise might be able to use. Now, having understood that, what the chances and risks of the two sides of the impacts are, let's have a look at the expectations in ESG and what this impact might be then in detail. Again, I would like to see a little bit of a feedback from the audience here. So when you're looking at managing environment, social and governance aspects at your company, how would you rate yourself? Just in general, and don't worry, I can't see your company name, so not attaching anything here to you. So either you're leading or you think, oh, well, quite average, or maybe slightly behind partners. There's other ways where you would say they are in front, or you might also say we don't even manage that topic. So let's have a look at the results. See, there's still people clicking the buttons. Let's wait a little bit.
As Andre said, this is completely anonymous. We can't see how you vote or even who you are clicking the button. So
yeah, so no worries there. Now the picture has changed a little bit. People were more confident now in voting. Very good. So there's a tie. Now it's on the side of slightly behind, or the other side was now average. So these two seem to be competing. So let's say about 2/3 are seeing themselves either slightly behind or average. There's a quarter that says we are leading, and there's another 12% who say, well, currently we seem to not manage this topic. So this looks like something like a quarter leading and a third saying average, and more than a third either slightly behind or even not managing that. Now let's have a look at a study that was recently done about the same question. This one was a 3PL study done just in the beginning of this year, and there's quite a similar result there. So there seems to be in this case, more than a third, but less than half saying I'm about average. But certainly there's about a third that says, oh, I might be behind or even far behind because I don't even manage that, or I'm not sure. And from my perspective, being not sure means something like I'm behind or I'm far behind, because that is obvious if you're not having any knowledge there. But that means we are a quite similar group here, and this is actually a good thing because this helps us in understanding the challenges from both sides and will also add to the discussion later. Now, that means for me that a lot of you have already embraced compliance as an opportunity, where I would see green logistics standards or vehicle classes as something that you are using to be on the market, to be more active there. But there's, as you see, four more steps here to come to a sustainable business value or to add more value there. The next level from here would be to make your value chains sustainable, and that is to optimize up and downstream. And I'm emphasizing this here because very often we look at upstream like discussing with our suppliers, discussing with our partners there, but only if you enter the full picture, you will have the full result or the highest value that you can add. This all is coming to the point of how can we contribute to a better world? So you're looking at your company, at your services, and think about how can I optimize that? And that's a very valid way to do. And this is very often the first step to come to generating sustainable business value. But it's, again, maybe falling a little bit short, because how would we discuss this differently if we were thinking about how can we contribute to our customers building a better world? Then it is not just about what I can do, but how I can enable my customer, my partner, to be even better. And they might ask for those solutions even more intensively than just setting, let's say, a green logistics standard and requiring us to follow that. And there I see three different options here. So first of all would be to design sustainable products and services, which is more than following compliance. It's really thinking about how can I make these processes and offerings different. Next level would then be, of course, new business models, novel value delivery with partners, something that wasn't there before, but you were one that created it, and most likely this will be with partners, because if it was just yourself, you might have had this idea already before. And then we come to the, let's say, to the top level, which is creating next practice platforms, where you even think about leaving your current industry, your sector, and going cross-industry and delivering value that come to multiple areas or that address multiple problems at once. Now, this seems a little bit abstract. Let's look at some ideas about this. One idea that I have experienced in Switzerland that is living there is Swiss Connect. This is a very interesting company, a small one, but it's on that, you could say, on one of those two top blocks there. What they do is they combine the different modes into one solution. They have bike couriers, they have taxis, railways, vans. They're not operating them themselves, but they are offering the platform for customers to use them. And there's three areas to that: economic, social, and governance that speak here now. Now, the economic sustainability point here is it's all about long-term collaboration and digital processes. Long-term collaboration means they are collaborating with these couriers, taxis, railways, and vans, and also customers, more than just on a transactional basis. And they allow them to do this very easily with digital processes. So I don't have to organize these different modes. They do that for me, but they also offer me direct integration into my shipping system so that I can use them very easily. That is one side of the story. The other one we haven't addressed so far, but which I think is very important in this area, is the social sustainability. They have established very high standards and even a collective labor agreement for bike couriers. There's a lot of discussion about that in Germany currently with different delivery service, where they said we can't live on exploiting people with freelance labor or with precarious, with very difficult working conditions. We have to make sure that all these people are secure, that they also deliver then, of course, the highest performance if we ask them to. And third one here, or fourth aspect here on the list, is transparency. For every single trip that I send my shipments with, I get a clear CO2 calculation. I get the part of the bike courier, of the taxi, of the railway, of the vans. Maybe I need to address one more point. Why is this innovative? You see it on the picture. They actually combine these modes in one shipping. So it means the bike courier would pick up the spare part. It was a spare part delivery concept I was working on. The spare part is at my hub. They would transport it to the next railway station. There they will put it into the train, which would run anyways between, let's say, Lucerne and Bern. Then in Bern, someone else as a bike courier would pick it up and deliver it to the customer. This was, first of all, much faster than any other delivery that was possible because of if you go from door to door. And it was also very cost attractive and even more very CO2 attractive. So this was why we were using that in my last company a lot when it came to, let's say, regional shipping of spare parts, which were most of the time time critical, but not like time critical in 20 minutes, but like next morning, 7:30, this needs to be at the customer side. So, and we were then able to use this service, and they were able to select the right combination of the modes. We will get back to this example again later, but now what they did is, of course, they would have checked their chances and risks on the different sides here of climate change and focus on resilience, making their business model very resilient to changes here. This is also then the expectation that I see coming up even more. I've brought you here an overview from Shift, which is a, let's say, very generic concept for looking at your business model. And they created a set of 3 red flag concepts for your business model. And let's quickly go through that and let's have a look at that, what it means for our sector. First of all, is the value proposition. So what are you offering and to whom are you offering it? Then, of course, the value chain. How are you delivering this value? And remember the Swiss Connect example, like I need these partners to do the job for me, otherwise it wouldn't work. And then the cost structure and the revenue model. So how are you going to be profitable using that? Now let's have a look at the full list and let's look at the first one, the value proposition. I hope you can read it. It's a little bit small, but the point is the first 2 here. So is your value proposition based completely on lowest cost of your service? Then surely this will put pressure on labor rights because you can't really make the lowest cost if you like emphasize on good working conditions and let's say competitive salary. This is not working very well together. And second one, which I found interesting, being the first ones on a list that is generic for the whole industry, high-speed delivery that places pressure on warehouse workers and logistics workers in the last mile. So here again, if that is the basis of your value proposition, also if that is your customer's basis for value proposition, this is a very difficult situation to make it a sustainable business model. Second one, the value chain. How are you delivering this service? They're the 2 that I found most speaking to us here is the point of the commodities with unclear provenance and visibility to impact on workers or communities. You might have to think about commodities more than just a physical commodity. Also transport can be a commodity. And if that is just something that happens transactional without any visibility to what is happening behind, this is putting already a risk situation here. And then if it's combined with the second one here, the business relationship being with limited influence to address risk to people, then of course these risks might materialize without the customer or us even noticing. Now coming to the cost structure, which I think most people are very familiar with from their business lines. So they're coming to the same point and coming to how Swiss Connect addressed it in a different way. If you're using gig workers or other precarious labor conditions, it's very difficult to make that a very sustainable working environment if it's not safe working places, safe in terms of payment, but also safe in words of conditions. And if you're then sourcing low-paid labor from labor providers, so not even having a relationship to your workers, but even that is kind of outsourced, this makes it even more difficult for you to take care in a way that a sustainable business would have to.
Can I comment here? Can I comment here 1 second? I just wanted to highlight how pleased I am that you actually are mentioning the social aspect. Because in the transportation sector, we've been focusing very much on environmental sustainability. But of course, there are enormous impacts for the communities around us and where we source our drivers, our truck workers, any other people who are actually carrying out the transportation. And it sometimes gets a little bit forgotten in discussions when it comes to sustainability. So I'm really pleased that you've mentioned it here.
Thanks a lot, Elina. And I think this is also very important to mention if we really look into the future, because the environment often is technical aspects, let's put it that way, while the other one is much closer to these three: the value proposition, the value chain, and the cost structure itself. And why this is so important, I found that in the same study, by the way, is that labor shortages already have impacted our operations. And you see here from that study, more than 3/4 of the shippers and more than half of the 3PL said this is having a negative impact on my operations. And on the other side, it is very clear and found in multiple studies in different sectors, including the transport sector, that values, diversity, and inclusion are becoming key to attract and retain talent. And especially diversity and inclusion seems to be a big chance for many companies, because you are just broadening the, let's say, the access to labor that you have. If you have a more interesting space, more interesting workplaces that speak to more people than just a very narrow group. Summing it up a little bit, what have we talked about so far? So in the expectations, the insights and transparency we need is, first of all, to complete the picture of our transport emissions, or let's say, I should have changed that word, not just the emissions, but really the impact. We all are aware of the operation, the buildings, the vehicles, the fuels, and they clearly have an impact. If you convert that to CO2, this comes to a result like on the first slide. So what's our impact as a transport sector? But second one is, this operation or these impacts only happen because of certain processes, how we agree on them, let's place it that way, like the conditioning of the transport, the refrigeration that is needed, or the packaging around it. And of course, let's say the negative side of something going wrong is also losses. So any damages, spoiling of goods, or even excess goods, so something that is there where it shouldn't be, is of course unnecessary carbon footprint, unnecessary transportation, unnecessary loss of value. And this leads to realizing a decision adequate data quality. So I have always placed the two sides here. We need to have information about the consumption to improve this operation. This doesn't quite work if we're only using fleet averages, like after a year checking what is the database value of our fleet. We should have it per actual transport. Think about the Swiss Connect example. So every single transport has a number, has a result. And this doesn't quite work again if we use default values. The actual transport only allows us to identify those where it went very good and identify those where it didn't work very well, and then improve. We have to monitor the outcome, the result. What was the quality level that we achieved? What was the emission that we created? Monitoring only the input, 5,000 ton kilometers, what is this going to tell us for a decision to be made? And of course, last fact here is real time. We need to have the information as close to when it happened as possible. The opposite side is what is happening a lot still when you talk about sustainability in terms of reporting issues. Well, you look at the numbers once per year and then you create a table and then you publish that. This is not going to help you with decisions to be made. And especially it's not going to help you with everyday decisions to be made. And I would like to get to an improvement saying we will naturally make everyday sustainable decisions. Now this leads us to, in order to be able to make those everyday sustainable decisions, to the need for collaboration. This will surely lead to a win-win situation. Now again, let me hear from your side, what are your biggest roadblocks at this time keeping you from making a bold move towards more sustainable logistics? You again have 6 options here where you say, this is my most important issues. I understand there might sometimes be more than one, but let's pick the one where you say, if that was solved, I would be already a lot better. This is interesting. So the picture is now changing a lot between the ones who voted first and the ones who are voting now. So let's see where we will end up.
Let's still give them just a moment. I see people are still voting.
Okay, I think we have a quite complete picture now. So top of the list is the presumed investment. So the investment you are expecting it to take to make it more sustainable. Already second on the list is data availability. And third is lack of internal knowledge. Then we actually have a tie there between internal knowledge, capacity to do it, transparency, and technology lock-in that you might be facing. This is interesting because let's have a look at some ideas about that. If you talk about potentials that we see and how to make use of them, I think every one of you is very aware of the loads and the issues with empty trips. And I have now just selected one overview here for large trucks between 26 and 40 tons. You see, if you're improving here on empty trips between like 100%, so meaning every return trip is empty, to only 20%, this has a potential of reduction of about 35%. This is a fairly recent study, 2 years old, so the numbers should be quite aligned with what you might be facing with a fairly, let's say, average fleet. On the other side, if we look at the load factor, then you see there's a much bigger potential here. It's about 75%. So as I also learned, the issue with transporting is typically not that you reach the 40 tons. It's actually the volume that you have a maximum, and there you can't exceed, or you can't put things as tightly together as you would like to. So here you see there's a very big potential in the improvement. Even if you're not looking at the 20% at the highest bar, but the later bars, there still the curve goes down much steeper than the one on the empty trip side. Now, question would be, where are we today? And there, as you can see here, empty trips, something between 20 and 40%, that's where we are today. So the remaining potential is not that big. On the other side, on the load factor, there we are at about 60%. So you see there's still a long way to go to reach, let's say, the end of that potential improvement. Similar with the modes. So we're talking a lot about the modes and how we can select better modes. Here, a little overview of emissions of freight transport in the EU as an average. And there you see the light duty vehicles, the short distances typically, that's very high per ton kilometer. If you think about the next level, heavy goods vehicles, air freight, freight train, you see compared to the last mile, this is much lower, but this is also much larger distances because this is per ton kilometer. Of course, the point here is the distance. And you see, nobody is surprised. Air freight is, of course, the highest value here. And it is factor 4 to a heavy goods vehicle. And the train, again, is factor 4 or 5 compared to the vehicles. So if we select better combination of these modes, we have a high potential. Again, sorry for picking on them so much, but that is the SwissConnect idea. They are combining those, not the air freight in Switzerland, but those three: light duty, heavy goods, freight train, and the bicycle, which is considered at zero, to work on these shipments. And of course, then we still have long distances. And here we have the very obvious difference between a container ship and air freight. And you can imagine here that a single unnecessary air freight that you're sending is having a very, very high impact and might cause your numbers to go up significantly compared to finding any other way on this table. But let me say it this way. Very often it's not the carrier itself deciding why it is sent as air freight or why is it sent with a train. It's of course the shipper and it's of course the customer that has a certain need. This brings us again to this picture, looking at the complete picture and realizing the decision adequate data quality. This brings us to areas of influence and the areas of cooperations, even more importantly, between the two sides. It's the typical hierarchy of things you do. So first you avoid or better plan your business, then you shift to better solutions, then you change technology. Technology change is that what most of you probably highlighted as presumed investment, because this is then really a key issue if you need to change your fleet. And execution, the way you do it when you have solved the others already. Now, from a carrier perspective, the avoidance or plan is having the right locations, doing the right bundling and routing. And it's the same basically on the shipper side. There you might add one point, which is circularity, which is consistent a little bit with the idea of the empty return trips of the load factor. If you can work there on new solutions that allow you to put things more in a circle and allow also reuse, this might have a very positive impact. But you can't do it alone. The shift is the vehicle types, or from the other side, the transport mode selected. There we saw on the graphs, big potentials there in selecting the right one. Very often this is so closely related to cost that you wouldn't want, like by accident, to select the wrong one. So I understand that most of you have that in place for yourself, but it comes again to the cooperation concept. Technology, of course, then selection of the fuel, for example. If you use, let's say, standard diesel versus biofuels, you have an option there to reduce the carbon footprint of your shipping. And of course, efficiency upgrades. So improving your vehicles, not selecting a different type of vehicle, but improving them. On the other side, on the shipper side, it's about the conditions that you define. It's about the specification for the transport. So if you define a certain packaging, temperatures, conditions, this has an impact on the other side, the vehicles and the technology the carrier can select from. And of course, it is about the execution. Sounds very easy. Driver trainings, you might already use them. Potential to be between 10 and 15% fuel reduction, which is a lot, which is in the same ballpark as the efficiency upgrades. So technology and execution here have about the same level of influence. But let me point out more the timing. Timing not just in how fast is the shipment to be, but also the point of what are the time windows from a shipper side. So if we talked about the impact of temperature changes or temperature increase, if those time windows are scheduled better or fitting better to the potential of different transport modes, then of course we have also the potential of using better transport, of combining the modes more efficiently compared to very tight windows, and that leaves you only with one option and you can't improve.
Can I jump in there? Because we had a great example actually from one of our customers last year shared this with us. So they're active in heavy manufacturing, and they actually crunched the numbers. They ran a pilot study. They had a look at what happens when they tweak time windows a little bit in their manufacturing processes. And they discovered that in many cases, if they have, say, a delivery window that's just 1 day later than the fastest option, they were able to make carbon savings of about 30% because they had big global trade lanes. And I mean, these were substantial amounts of cargo being transported. So even just adding that 1 day into the process did have an enormous impact on emissions. It's not trivial at all.
Yes, very true. And interesting that you're saying that, because on a workshop I was yesterday, I had a similar story being told about a company that's let's say, very happy because they get a lot of requests from their customers to ship spare parts and additional components fast. But they then noticed, well, we actually have 2 time windows where we are anyways sending those. Does it really have to be at the production site 1 hour earlier? Mm-hmm. Is this really the point? Or is it just because people select, I need it now, but actually it is not required? So communication here seems to be really a key, and questioning, not questioning in a sense, I know better, but asking, are you sure this is what you need? And can we work together to reduce the number of, let's say, unnecessarily express shipments? And that comes to these two axes here I highlighted in green. So it's kind of a lean collaboration. If you work inside a factory on logistics, you get to lean collaboration saying, what is the reduction I can achieve here in waste? Waste of speed sounds funny, but that is actually the point. Waste of transportation happening too often. And for that, you need very good data exchange. You also need to standardize. Otherwise, you're very busy in getting to the same level of inferential granularity. And you should be able to digitalize your information in order to be faster, to react faster. And that brings me again to Swiss Connect, who did that job in finding, I need to exchange the data with my customer on a very easy level. I have to standardize the ways I can send things, and I have to harmonize my offering for that, with still a lot of option behind. But to the customer side, it's one offering. I offer you the matching transport solution for your requirement. And they digitalized, because I, as a customer, did not have to select these issues. I just had to set 3 parameters, and they would select the right shipment for that. Also, on the other side, maybe putting a different thought to that, also meaning that I would not select that. I would just set the parameters, and I would leave it to that shipper to make the best selection for me, because they actually know what carriers they have and how they can arrange that in the best way. So as a summary, this brings us to what is cooperation? Cooperation enables sustainable logistics. So we need to have this full picture. We need to have decision adequate data quality, and we need to have collaboration as working together, each of us seeing their share of the issue and their, let's say, their flexibility and their competence to bring into this full picture. And that together will have an impact in a set of ways. First of all, it will improve resilience. So the physical and transition risk we mentioned at the beginning, the human rights issues, I can manage this so much better if I have this data level and also cooperation level. Second, of course, is climate change. The CO2 emissions and resource use can be reduced dramatically. Third is very important for us, the employee attraction and retention. We saw the human rights issues hidden in our business cases. If we can improve that, we will have much better situation on the labor market. And fourth is value creation. Value in terms of quality, but also in the obvious term of cost reduction and of reduction of losses. And it will help us in making our customers love us, because we do have adequate data for customers who need it for their reporting, who need it for their stakeholders, or for who need it for themselves to be able to secure the bonds from the EU taxonomy or the reporting issues to solve it. With that picture, I would like to say thank you very much, and I'm now happy to learn from you and your questions and get in touch.
So one thing I've noticed in the questions, we have some quite lively engagement and a very nice conversation going on in the questions. There was an example that one participant raised, which actually is really interesting and fascinating, relating to the Swiss example that you had of sort of local scale multimodal transports. There's actually been a quite similar concept in place in India since the 1890s. They have an intricate system of how to get lunch boxes from the homes in the community to the workers in their workplace and back again every day on a mass scale, for example, in Mumbai. So they've actually been making that concept work because theirs is multimodal. They have different vehicles and means of transport for the different legs. And they have an intricate coding system to make sure that the right lunchbox gets to the right person and back again, even though it passes hands multiple times en route. So actually, it's quite interesting to see a very similar concept coming back to life in Europe in a different form. And it's time-honored, tried and tested in India. It truly works. It's a remarkably efficient system. And Ramesh, thank you very much for raising that example. I think it's a brilliant one. Really nice to see.
It's a very nice one. And it actually also says that collaboration and data exchange doesn't mean to have big servers and infrastructure. It works on that level.
Yes. We have a question from Valentin. What is the best practice to track CO2 emissions from transportation? That's a tough one to answer because, Andre, before I let you take over, we've actually been asking our customers this for the last couple of years as well. And one of the biggest obstacles at the moment has been that people aren't actually completely sure what to measure, let alone how. So deciding precisely which data would actually help you make the right decisions is not easy, especially when you start looking at multimodal transportation networks where you have many different factors, or you have whole carrier networks where possibly as a shipper, you don't actually see all the legs that your transport goes through.
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you just said, Elina. And the point here is there's certain guidelines that help you in selecting good ways of doing that. And maybe even more important, to enable you to speak the same language with your partners. Because then you can select ideas from the standards like the GLEC framework and say, look, that is what I'm interested in. Can you realize that? When you ask me about best practice, I would say a very good concept that was enabled already, I think 15 or 20 years ago by a very big yellow company from Germany was to attach the CO2 values to every single order item. So in their background ERP system, they already have the data combined. So it's not like creating reports and then trying to make sense of the numbers. It is already on the base number. And that, of course, makes it much easier than to also slice and dice your data to what your customer needs or to what you need to communicate to your carrier to make improvements.
We have another question from Lawrence. Going green, autogas uses in transport. How can this translate to saving cost in daily deliveries in terms of intermodal transport? Does it reduce carbon footprint?
Yeah, let me bring this question on one step higher about the selection of fuels or selection of technology in the vehicle. Yes, so it will have an impact on carbon footprint. You can use emission factors there to calculate the difference. It's again, at the end, it's about the overall efficiency. How much fuel are you burning per kilometer? And how much transport can you realize then with this vehicle? Very often, if you talk about the drivetrain efficiency, these technology selections like autogas versus diesel versus gasoline are dwarfed by the switch to electric transport. If distances are working, you have a factor 4 in efficiency. And that often also leads, especially if you're doing a lot of shippings, to big cost savings then that you can enable. But there's an upfront investment that is different to autogas or diesel or gasoline.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience at this time? I know this is a very large area. We could probably dig into 100 different points. And what I know from many of our customers is that people actually are really quite at the beginning of the journey. There's still a lot of exploration to be done. We have another comment from Valentin. As the transportation market is quite old school, there are many carriers who cannot report CO2 emissions on the shipment level. We've heard this too, by the way. And even if your carrier can report it, in a diverse network, it would be high effort to have always the same data structure.
Yes, I completely agree with this is really a big issue. This is really from historic reasons to come to an agreement to change on multiple sides the way how you create and report data. I would say rethinking the way how you organize yourself and your partner, and asking if, what I'm trying to say is, if you go on at least the level of the invoices, the order items, think about how can you attach, like the yellow example, how can you attach values to these order items, leaving you from the difference of creating new data like afterwards and having it in the process. I understand that this is difficult for many carriers who maybe not even have that high level of infrastructure, of IT infrastructure. But I would say there's a potential in having like telematics or other devices taking that away from you. You would then still live on, let's say, more averaged values, but that is better than no values. So that would be an idea just from out of my head that could solve that. Going for a solution that helps the shipper, like a telematics solution. There's very inexpensive ones, so that they are already able to have at least this basic data points helping you to improve together.
I'm quite curious to see what will happen if there will be a certain consolidation towards shared standards, more so in the future, but also, of course, the impact, as you say, of telemetry devices actually on the trucks measuring the real emissions. I've seen some models where it's actually free for the carriers, except they do need to obviously devote some time to equipping the trucks with the devices, but then after that, the shipper pays the fee. That might become a trend. At the moment, it's very much still in the emerging phase. That could solve some of the problems, of course.
Yeah, and excellent point, Alina. And it also leads to the point of, well, sometimes it's like you expect all data to be free. There's an effort in creating data. Mm-hmm. So it also needs that collaboration between the two, saying, how should we share this cost? Not just one side, but really share the cost and share the effort and make that work for both.
And of course, ultimately, the willingness and pressure from consumers to take this into consideration as well. Mm-hmm. There, I think there's still a bit of awareness work left to be done, that maybe getting everything overnight isn't always necessary, or at least it could be tied to a price tag, because at the moment we do tend to get things at the cost of the environment, and we as consumers don't in fact always pay the true cost of our decisions. So maybe that will also change over time, especially as companies begin having to pay things like carbon taxes. I have a feeling that there probably will be some movement and effort to distribute the cost a little more fairly.
Yeah. I think there have been a lot more questions now. I saw one from Adriana or from Paul. Maybe you can check some.
Yeah. So Adriana commented that when lead times are longer, such as in the example I gave of 1 day later delivery, additional stock should be held within the supply chain to avoid any disruptions. CO2 impact should be assessed case by case, as the manufacturing or production emissions might be higher than the freight-related ones. Absolutely true. That is something to consider case by case, I imagine.
And it's an excellent example where in the design of the supply chain and the design of the logistics included there, you have to take into account both. What's the warehouse impact? What is the product that is lying somewhere impact? And what's the transport impact? And very often lean transporting or lean concepts here, just-in-time concepts, have led to the idea that everything in between, it doesn't matter. I need to have it day by day, and I don't care how you get it to me. I think it's, again, the customer and the shipper and carrier need to work together on finding, is it actually true that I need to have additional stock? What are the potential disruptions there? And how can I avoid the disruption? How can I create this resilience that I was talking about earlier?
We have time just for another couple of questions. Do you think it's more important to collaborate with other companies or to be part of some kind of initiative, e.g. science-based target initiatives, and why?
I would say it's not either or. It's actually both. So why am I saying that? you have to collaborate with others. And I think there was another question about trust.
Yes.
The point is here, you might require a platform that enables the trust or enables that confidentiality if that is an issue in your area. Yes, but you can't reach the real improvements if you're working only on your own. Now, the other side, the initiatives. Why do I like the initiatives? I like them because they are also in a way standardizing the measurement, standardizing the numbers, and standardizing the activities. So they help in understanding each other, and they make it easy for anyone related there, for anyone to select better partners. If I'm science-based targets listed and I find my partners to be there, I can expect a certain level of understanding, and we can get together quicker and discuss these issues easier than with someone who has maybe no idea. So I think these initiatives help a lot in making it transparent who's already working there, who can I address and talk to, and they would understand my issues very hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Do we still have a moment to go into the final question about the trust?
For me, yes.
So cooperation and collaboration has been on the agenda for years, but trust has always been the stumbling block. Has the green agenda changed the mood?
So I think, Alina, you also have some background knowledge there, but I would say yes, it has, because people now understand it's not just some, or let me start another way. There was always the mistrust that the information would be used for different meanings. So if I get very transparent details about carbon footprint, I could also question the different decisions my partner made there, or I could even kind of, let's say, back engineer their processes and, let's say, select the ones that I like and use it with different partners. So that, especially in some areas, was really an issue that you would say, I'm not telling anything, because if I do, I might be out of business because the other side might take that only to their advantage and then drop me. I think that has changed because people understand that also resilience and quality are not for free, and they are not able on this type of mistrust for both sides. So I would say yes, in general, it has improved. And second part of my answer is, I also see platforms enabling that, let's say, trust or confidentiality on the other side, in that allows you to make these improvements without showing too much of your inside processes. And that also is a way in how to work together better. If there's no trust level on the highest level, at least to get on one level lower, use a partner that is helping to agree on confidentiality and then make it work.
I wonder if there might also be a way in there to create platforms that mediate and remove some of those concerns. I mean, we know that in the past for collaboration projects, there have been great legal concerns about sharing certain data with competitors, which is entirely understandable. Maybe anonymizing certain things could, but yeah, that's probably in the future.
If you think about these multi-partner milk runs, where you don't just do that for one, but for multiple partners and multiple shippers also combine, and carriers, this very often is only possible with a platform, because otherwise there's always a risk that one would take over everything and would say, I'm doing it, maybe even at higher cost for myself, but I'm getting the others out of business. And there I see those platforms having a major role to play in making that work.
Another couple of questions. I'm very happy to see this high level of engagement. So if it's okay with you, I'd still like to put forth another couple of questions that we've got. Valentin asks, do you see the usage of a TMS system as an option to track CO2? Or are the unknown transport factors, such as broken transports, too high to calculate accurate CO2 from it?
Let's say, Elena, you are more the detailed TMS system expert, but I would say no data is the worst form of data. So if I have data and I know the level of confidence I can put into that, I think this is a start we have to have. We can't live on no data. So we have to use the systems we have, and then be able to at least do a sensitivity analysis of how much are these broken transport factoring in here. Do we need to take care of them, or is it actually on the total range of data not that important? This is the whole discussion of scope 3 emissions, if you're aware of that, where if you try to get exact numbers for every one of these 15 categories, you will spend years on that. If you have a way to get at least averages and then highlight on the hotspots and their work on detailed data, this will bring you actually much further and is also the better impact you will have.
And a final question. Actually, a couple. They keep coming. This is great. I'm very happy to see people asking. Listening to current limitations discussed, in your opinion, Andre, are carriers prepared for all companies to ship 100% green? Would supply match the demand?
So putting two unknowns in the equation is difficult for me. Let's say if we look at the time and also the, let's say, the net zero commitments that companies are engaging in, yes, I would say the demand might be much higher in short time, because how should they otherwise meet their goals? That's why I said these target settings, SBTI especially, are variable, not because only of what I said, like the common understanding that you create, but also of making this demand visible. And if you look then at potential customers that you have and see them all on the SBTI listing, you could say they all have this issue. Coming back to my slide that I had with the two blocks, and then you might be able to enable your customer to do better. And then they would really be engaged with you and work with you more closely than if you're just one of the other solution providers.
From another perspective, we've had this conversation with a lot of our customers over the last couple of years in our advisory boards as well. And basically what's happening is that the low-hanging fruit is being harvested quickly. So the areas where customers or companies can easily cut emissions are being pruned quickly and being tackled quickly because there are known and trusted solutions to those things. But once those low-hanging fruit are gone, they're going to have to start looking at the things that are notoriously difficult to decarbonize, like transportation. And that's where you start seeing these more collaborative approaches where different stakeholders have a contribution to make, or a combination of different tools that each make a small dent in the emissions. Together, it's a substantial change. So it just gets harder and harder at some point to cut further. And that's where I think a lot of the creative energy will start coming up.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Most companies are still using diesel for transport operations. Going green and tracking the data and using a system that complements different collaborators like a 3PL provider, not making the data available for easy collaboration. How can this be easily tracked? Asking the hard questions.
I'm actually not quite sure if I get the point of the question. So yes, most companies are still using diesel, and still to date, diesel has its role because of long distance transports, because of not being substitutable by electric transport. Let's put that one out. But as I said also earlier, there's still low-hanging fruits maybe, but there's still a lot of potential in also improving the way you use those transports and in the way you increase the factors there, the load factor, the efficiency of those transports. And it needs the two sides to work together. Otherwise, you can't. If the specifications, like we said, are too tight, you can't make improvements. If you have been taken away all your competences to make decisions or to select different ways, there is maybe no improvement. So the other side also needs to offer room for decisions to be made at the carrier level even.
So we are going to have to wrap up. I just want to mention Alex gave some good input on multilateral contracts to allow for a better level of trust if you are going to do collaborative networking. But we are out of time now, very much. Thank you so much for all the questions, for your input, Andre. It was fantastic having you here on the call today with these insights. there are a lot of challenges for us to tackle out there. So every piece of advice and knowledge and insight is truly welcome. And I look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. We have more of them coming up on the topic of sustainability. The next one is on February 22nd, how to get ahead of the new European sustainability reporting standards that I mentioned earlier. And while you're at it, cut your emissions. That's the topic for the next time. So I wish you all a fantastic remainder of the day, and thank you so much for participating. Thank you, Andre.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.